At 10:58 on the morning of August 24, 2010, a radio operator in Northern Europe leaned toward his receiver and heard something that should not have been there. Silence. For decades, the Russian shortwave station, nicknamed the Buzzer, had occupied 4,625 kilohertz with a dull mechanical pulse. Day and night, the sound repeated roughly 25 times a minute. It had survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, military reorganizations, political crises, and the arrival of the Internet. Then, without warning, the heartbeat stopped. The operator checked his antenna. He changed receivers. He searched nearby frequencies. Other listeners across Europe began reporting the same thing. The buzzer was gone. And somewhere beyond the static waited a question no government has ever answered. If this signal exists to keep part of Russia's military command network alive, what does its silence mean? Some believe it is merely an old communications channel. Others claim it is connected to Perimeter, the Soviet nuclear retaliation system known in the West as the Dead Hand. There is no public evidence that the radio station can launch a missile. But the truth may be more unsettling than the legend, because UVB-76 appears to be part of a network designed for the moment when modern communications failed, and the only messages left are military orders moving through the dark. Listeners call it UVB-76, although even that famous name may have begun as a transcription error. Over the years, the station has used different collective call signs, including UZB-76, MDZHB, ZHUOZ, and ANVF. Its operators have never publicly introduced themselves. No official Russian agency has explained its full purpose. Most of the time, it broadcasts no language at all. A buzz lasts a little more than a second. A pause follows. Then the sound begins again. The rhythm is too mechanical to be natural, yet too crude to feel modern. It resembles a machine in an empty room, repeating one task because no one has arrived to tell it to stop. Then the pattern breaks. The buzzing vanishes. Static fills the channel. A voice begins reading in Russian. A call sign, a group of numbers, a coded word, then another group of numbers. The delivery is flat and disciplined. There is no explanation and no acknowledgement. When the message ends, the buzzer returns, covering the frequency as if nothing happened. To understand why that sound inspires nuclear legends, we have to return to the logic of the Cold War. By the late 20th century, the United States and the Soviet Union possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other many times over. Their fragile peace depended on retaliation. If one side launched a first strike, the other had to remain capable of answering. Neither government needed to survive the war. It only needed to convince its enemy that an attack could never eliminate the response. This doctrine became known as mutually assured destruction. It was not peace in the traditional sense. It was a hostage situation involving entire civilizations. But deterrence had a weakness. A sufficiently fast attack might destroy political leaders, command bunkers, and communications links before a retaliatory order could reach the missile forces. The weapons might survive underground while the people authorized to use them were already dead. The Soviet answer was Perimeter. Developed during the Cold War and placed into service in the 1980s, Perimeter was a backup nuclear command and control system. Public accounts differ on its exact level of automation, and much of its operation remains classified. The most credible descriptions suggest it was not a machine permanently waiting to launch on its own. Soviet leadership would first activate it during an extreme crisis. Only then could it preserve the ability to transmit a retaliatory order if normal command channels were destroyed. Its most extraordinary known component was a command rocket. Instead of carrying a conventional nuclear warhead toward an enemy city, this rocket was designed to fly over Soviet territory and broadcast launch authorization to surviving missile units below. Even if ground antennas had been damaged and headquarters reduced to ruins, the order could still travel from the sky. That system was real. The alleged connection between it and the buzzer is not established. Yet the rumor refuses to die because UVB-76 behaves like a channel built for endurance. Shortwave radio does not require fiber optic cables, cell towers, or a functioning internet. Its signals can travel across enormous distances by reflecting through the upper atmosphere. A receiver can remain silent and passive. It reveals nothing about who is listening. And unlike a satellite network, a basic radio link can continue operating after much of a country's advanced infrastructure has failed. This makes 4,625 kilohertz useful in exactly the kind of emergency military planners fear most. One popular theory imagines the buzzing as a dead man's switch. As long as the tone continues, command still exists. If the transmitter is destroyed, the disappearance of the signal helps trigger a retaliatory process. It is an elegant horror story. It is also unsupported by public evidence. Loss of a shortwave signal can be caused by equipment failure, atmospheric conditions, maintenance, or deliberate relocation. No rational nuclear system would treat one missing radio tone as proof that a nation had been annihilated. But legends often grow around a fragment of truth. The buzzer may not be the switch that launches the dead hand. It may instead be one small voice circuit within Russia's wider military communications structure. A line kept open so authenticated orders can move rapidly when other systems are damaged or unavailable. The buzz itself may simply be a channel marker. By occupying the frequency continuously, it discourages other stations from using it and allows receivers to remain tuned to the correct channel. When a real message must be sent, the marker stops, the voice traffic passes, and the tone resumes. That explanation is less cinematic than a Doomsday trigger. But listen to what it implies. Somewhere inside Russia, military units may be monitoring that frequency around the clock, waiting for coded messages they have been trained to recognize. We do not know what the messages order. We only know that someone continues to send them. For years, outsiders compared those transmissions to Cold War numbers stations. Such stations sent encrypted instructions to intelligence agents abroad, using voices that recited groups of numbers. A spy needed only an ordinary receiver and a one-time pad. The broadcast could reach thousands of listeners, but only the person holding the correct key could understand it. Counterintelligence might hear every number and still learn nothing. UVB-76 shares the surface features: shortwave, coded groups, anonymous voices. But its fixed frequency, military-style call signs, and traffic patterns have led many monitors to a different conclusion. Its intended audience is more likely a network of Russian military stations, then secret agents in foreign apartments. And then came the silence of 2010. The radio operator kept recording as the empty frequency hissed through his headphones. Minutes passed. Across online monitoring groups, reports multiplied. Some listeners feared a technical failure. Others wondered whether the station's disappearance signaled a military emergency. Nobody outside the network knew enough to tell the difference. The silence did not begin a nuclear war. Instead, it marked a transformation. For years, the signal had been associated with a military communications site at Povarovo, northwest of Moscow. In 2010, activity shifted as Russia reorganized its military districts. The old location was later found abandoned. Explorers entering the compound photographed decaying buildings, exposed cables, discarded documents, and equipment left behind in rooms slowly being reclaimed by moisture and weeds. The imagery encouraged darker stories. Guards fleeing without warning, secret orders buried in logbooks. A Doomsday transmitter moved hours before catastrophe. The available evidence supports a more ordinary explanation, a military relocation. But ordinary does not mean unimportant. The signal returned under new call signs and appeared to involve more than one transmitter site. The network had not died, it had adapted. The buzzer's crude sound also revealed something unexpected about its construction. For much of its history, the marker appeared to be generated as audio and fed into a live communications circuit. When the line remained open, sounds from the operating environment occasionally leaked onto the air. Listeners reported footsteps, distant conversations, bumps against equipment, and fragments of speech. These intrusions destroyed the illusion of a fully automated ghost station. There were people behind the signal, operators close enough to a microphone for the world to hear them move. Imagine that room during an alert. Fluorescent lights hum above aging consoles. A communications officer receives a sealed message. The buzzer is cut. Thousands of unknown receivers across Russia and countless civilian listeners beyond its borders open at the same moment. The officer reads a call sign, a code word, and number groups. Somewhere far away, another soldier writes them down, verifies them, and acts. We cannot know whether any particular message concerned an exercise, a logistics instruction, a readiness test, or something more serious. That uncertainty is the real source of the fear. The public can hear the command channel, but it cannot read the command. The mythology became even darker whenever music appeared on 4,625 kilohertz. The most infamous reports involved Swan Lake. To audiences outside the former Soviet Union, it is simply Tchaikovsky. To millions who lived behind the Iron Curtain, the ballet carries a different memory. Soviet television repeatedly aired classical programming during periods when authorities were slow to announce the death of an aging leader. During the failed coup of August 1991, state television showed Swan Lake while armored vehicles entered Moscow, and the political future of the Soviet Union hung in the balance. The image became shorthand for a government hiding a crisis behind controlled beauty. So when fragments of the music appeared around the buzzer's frequency, some listeners interpreted them as an omen. But caution matters. Shortwave channels can be jammed, imitated, or hijacked by unauthorized transmitters. Music heard on 4,625 kilohertz does not automatically prove that the station's official operators played it. In recent years, the frequency has attracted deliberate interference, precisely because its reputation guarantees an audience. This is where the facts separate from the legend. The facts are that a Russian military-linked radio network has occupied 4,625 kilohertz for decades. It uses a repetitive channel marker. It interrupts that marker to transmit structured voice messages. Its call signs and sites have changed. Its full operational purpose has not been publicly disclosed. The legend says the tone is holding back the end of the world. There is no verified evidence that silence on UVB-76 automatically activates perimeter or launches nuclear weapons. There is no proof that its messages direct foreign spies. Even ionospheric research, another proposed explanation, fails to account neatly for its military-style traffic. Every simple theory leaves something unexplained. But dismissing the station as harmless would be another kind of mistake. Military communications are not meaningless simply because they do not control missiles directly. Nuclear deterrence depends on orders reaching the right people under the worst possible conditions. A resilient shortwave network could be one layer in that architecture without being a magical apocalypse switch. And perimeter itself remains the darker historical fact. The Soviet Union genuinely built a system intended to preserve retaliation after a decapitating strike. Its purpose was to make victory through nuclear surprise impossible. Later Russian officials indicated that the system remained operational, although its present configuration is classified. The machine did not remove human fear from nuclear decisions. It institutionalized that fear. It transformed the destruction of leadership from a possible end to the conflict into the condition under which a final order might still escape. That is why the buzzer matters, even when the conspiracy theory is stripped away. Its sound belongs to a world where governments plan communications for after cities burn, where a command must survive longer than the commander, and where technology from the analog age remains valuable because it may endure conditions that destroy newer systems. Tonight, anyone with the right receiver can search for 4,625 kilohertz. Atmospheric noise will rise and fall. Signals may fade with distance and weather. Then, if propagation is favorable, the buzz will emerge. Brief, mechanical, indifferent. Most listeners will hear only an obsolete radio marker. Military personnel somewhere may hear a line that must never be allowed to close. And the rest of us are left outside the code, able to hear the machinery of history without knowing what it has been ordered to do. So what is your verdict? Is the buzzer merely a durable military channel, or is it connected to a deeper emergency network built for the first hours of nuclear war? Leave your answer in the comments. Subscribe to The Modern Ledger and join us for the next hidden mechanism that shaped the modern world. Because governments can bury their orders. They can abandon the stations that carried them. But history keeps a record, and the modern ledger never closes.